In 480 BC, a Spartan king did the unthinkable. With just 300 men, he marched into a war they were guaranteed to lose. No backup, no retreat, surrounded by tens of thousands of patient soldiers, they held their ground like statues carved from bronze. No fear, no hesitation. What gave them this supernatural discipline? A mental weapon so intense, so effective, that it was eventually banned in Athens. This wasn't just warfare, it was a philosophy of focus. And today, in a world addicted to noise, it might be the cure we've forgotten. Because let's be honest, we live in the most distracted generation in human history. You wake up and the first thing you touch isn't water or your face, it's your phone. You scroll for validation, chase dopamine like a junkie, and by the time you blink, half the day is gone. Focus isn't just rare, it's a superpower. And most people don't have it, but the Spartans did. Not because they were born different, but because they were trained to be different. And what they practiced wasn't some motivational speech or a 10-minute morning routine. It was forged in pain, in silence, in psychological war. They called it the agoge. It started when boys were just 7 years old, taken from their families, stripped of luxury, comfort, and anything soft. The only thing they were allowed to keep was their will. They were starved, beaten, and left in the cold, not to break them, but to shape them. Focus wasn't taught, it was forced. They learned to sit still under physical pain without blinking. They were trained to track every sound in a forest, every movement on a battlefield. They ate while their enemies watched. They slept knowing someone might strike at any moment. The mind became a weapon, hardened, sharp, unbreakable. And it worked so well, in fact, that Athens, the land of poets and politics, labeled the practice dangerous, inhuman, too powerful. But Spartans didn't care. They weren't trying to please society, they were trying to conquer it. And this method that turned fragile boys into war machines holds a truth the modern world doesn't want you to know. Because if you understood how to master your focus, truly master it, you'll be unstoppable. And the world isn't ready for that. Let's go back to that battle. Demophile. The year is 480 BC. King Leonidas and his Spartans stand shoulder to shoulder in a narrow pass, facing a Persian army of over 100,000. The math says they should be crushed in minutes. But that's not what happened. For 3 days, they held the line. No chaos, no panic. Every man in sync. Every movement precise. No distractions. Just lethal awareness. One historian, Plutarch, wrote that Spartans, warriors, were so disciplined they could hear the heartbeat of their comrades in combat. That's how in tune they were with themselves, with the moment, with their mission. Not because they were fearless, but because their focus drowned out fear. And here's the part modern society or modern science confirms. This wasn't just willpower. It was neurobiology. When you eliminate distraction long enough, the brain activates something called the prefrontal cortex, the seat of discipline, decision-making, and long-term thinking. Spartans, without ever reading a neuroscience paper, lived inside this zone. Constant exposure to pressure rewired their brains. They developed deep focus, the kind that athletes call flow rates. Where time slows down, where the noise disappears, where instinct takes over and you perform at your peak without thinking. Today, most people live in opposite state, shallow focus, a few seconds here, a few seconds there. But Spartans, they lived in depth because they were trained to lock in. When they studied, they didn't fidget. When they fought, they didn't flinch. When they died, they didn't beg. Focus was life. And in a world where attention is constantly being sold to their highest bidder, that kind of focus is more than rare. It's revolutionary. Now, here's what they don't teach you. Most people fail not because they are weak, but because their mind is noisy, untrained, pulled in 50 directions. Spartans silenced that noise. They didn't have social media, but they had other distractions: fear, hunger, pain. And they learned to override them, not with motivation, but with method. The agoge was brutal, yes, but it worked. And now, 2,500 years later, modern psychology and military science are starting to prove it. Because it turns out, the path to unbreakable focus hasn't changed much. It's still forged in silence, in discomfort, in choosing discipline over dopamine. And the Spartans were the original masters of that code. So how do you bring this ancient, forbidden focus into your own life? You don't need to carry a spear or sleep on stone floors, but you do need to choose discomfort consciously. That's where the transformation begins. Here are 3 Spartan steps you can apply starting tomorrow. Step 1. The agoge morning routine. Spartans began each day with intensity, no softness, no luxury. They understood that when you start the day is how you live the day. So here's your modern version. Wake up early before the noise begins. No phone, no music, no scrolling, just silence and presence. The first 30 minutes are yours to dominate. Drop into cold water or take a cold shower, not because it's trendy, but because it tells your body, I choose difficulty. Then sit, breathe, and review your mission. Not your to-do list, your mission. One goal, one enemy, one battlefield. Do this daily, and within 30 days, you'll feel the fog lift. Step 2. The 300 rule. Spartans trained in small, focused units. Tight formations, 0 distractions. You must do the same. Choose one major goal, just one, and give it 300 focus minutes per week. That's 5 hours of undivided deep work. No multitasking, no tabs, no notification, just you and the task. Whether it's building a business, studying or creating, treat those 300 minutes like battle. Defend them with your life. If you can protect even 5 hours of pure focus in a world of chaos, you've already surpassed 99% of people. Step 3. The silence drill. Spartans weren't loud. They weren't flashy. They trained in silence, because silence reveals everything. Your fears, your thoughts, your lies. Every day, set aside 10 minutes to sit in complete silence. No phone, no books, no input, just stillness. At first, it will be uncomfortable. That's the point. Let the noise come up. Watch your mind resist. And then, slowly, you'll feel something shift. This is where real focus begins. Not with motivational quote, but with confronting the chaos in your head and choosing not to run from it. These 3 steps are simple, but they are not easy. That's the point. Focus isn't found in comfort. It's forged in the fire of choosing what's hard on purpose. And the Spartans lived this code long before science caught up to explain it. But here's where the story takes a darker turn. The Spartan method didn't go unnoticed. While they were building warriors, philosophers in Athens were watching with suspicion. To them, what Sparta was doing wasn't noble, it was terrifying. A society that raised boys to ignore pain, to reject comfort, to fight without fear, that was a threat, not just to the battlefield, but to the very foundations of democracy. Athens stood for art, debate, individualism. Sparta stood for science, silence, duty, and sacrifice. Athens built thinkers. Sparta built soldiers. And while both cities shaped history, their philosophies collided like fire and ice. The agoge wasn't just training, it was indoctrination. It created loyalty so strong, Spartans would die before they disobey. That kind of mental conditioning scared the Athenian leaders, because how do you argue with a man who doesn't flinch? How do you control someone who doesn't fear death? So Athens banned it, quietly, indirectly. They outlawed similar training. They labeled the agoge barbaric, backward, uncivilized. But the truth, it made Spartans too powerful, too dangerous, and most importantly, too focused. In a world run by destruction, nothing is more threatening than a man that can't be manipulated. You see, focus isn't just personal power, it's political power. It's the power to resist, to rebel, to build your own path. And that's why the system doesn't want you to have it. That's why they were encouraged to scroll, to consume, to compare. Because a focused individual becomes a dangerous one, a free one, just like the Spartans. So yes, the method was banned because the world doesn't fear chaos, it fears clarity. And the agoge gave man unshakable clarity. And now, you have to ask yourself, what will that kind of focus look like in your life? What will happen if you stopped chasing every notification, every opinion, every shining thing pulling your attention away from your mission? What would your life look like if you could stare down chaos and not blink? Because this is deeper than productivity. It's not about color-coded calendars or fancier to-do list. This is about identity. Who are you when the world around you is spinning, loud and distracted, and you stay locked in? That's what the Spartans embodied. And the modern world doesn't teach that anymore. We are taught to express ourselves, not control ourselves. We are trained to react, not focus. But Spartans, they build their entire existence on opposite principles. Discipline over freedom, silence over noise, purpose over pleasure. And this isn't ancient history, it's timeless truth, because today the battlefield looks different. You are not holding a shield, you are now holding a smartphone. You are not fighting patience, you are fighting your own comfort, your own impulses. But make no mistake, the war is just as real. And the consequences of losing focus are just as deadly. You don't get stabbed by a spear, you get stabbed by destruction, doubt, wasted years. You get torn apart slowly by scrolling, by fear, by excuses. The Spartans' secret wasn't that they had no fear. It's that they made their focus stronger than their fear. They starved distractions. They punished weakness. They worshipped mastery. And in doing so, they became legends. Now the question is, what will you become? You don't need to be born in Sparta to train like one. You don't need to fight in an armor to live with unbreakable clarity. But you do need to choose. Every day, every hour, every moment you pick depth over dopamine, you step into that arena, not as a slave of the world, but as a master of yourself. But there is one final truth. The part no one tells you. Focus comes at a cost. Spartans paid it. Every day, they gave up comfort. They gave up safety. They gave up illusion of a soft life. And in return, they earned power, the kind that echoes through centuries. But power demands sacrifice, and that's how the line most people won't cross. They want focus, but they also want the scroll. They want greatness, but they also want ease. They want to be lions, but they sleep like sheep. That's not how it works. The Spartans knew. You don't rise without pain. You don't lead without loss. You don't own your mind until you burn away everything that weakens it. That's why the agoge was brutal. Because it wasn't honest. It didn't coddle you. It forced you. And maybe that's what modern life is missing. Not the information, but initiation. A trial, a test, a forge, a reason to wake up every day and bleed for something greater than dopamine. Athens wanted democracy. Sparta demanded discipline. And while Athens built culture, Sparta built clarity. They didn't focus, they teach focus. They became it, living, breathing, unshakable embodiments of what happens when the mind bows to the submission of the mission. So now, the world is asking you, without saying it, to choose to either be like everyone else, reactive, distracted, soft, or to walk a path that hasn't been walked in thousands of years. The warrior path, the focused path, the Sparta path. So here we are, 2,500 years later, and the world is noisier than ever. Most people can't read a full paragraph without getting bored. They can't go 5 minutes without checking their phones. Their attention span is broken. Their minds are hijacked, and they don't even realize it. But you do, because now you know the truth. You've seen what real focus looks like. Not motivational quotes, not 5-minute hacks, but discipline earned in silence. The kind of focus that scares the world, because it can't be bought, sold, or manipulated. That's why the Spartan method was built. It didn't just build warriors, it built men who couldn't be controlled. And in every era, that kind of man is a threat, not because it destroys, but because it can't be distracted. And when the world can't distract you, it can own you. That's the part they don't want you to figure out. But now that you've heard this, you have a choice. Will you just nod and move on? Or will you test yourself? Will you try the silence, the discipline, the discomfort? Will you step into the fire like boys of Sparta did and come out something stronger? Because you already know the truth. Most people wouldn't survive Spartan training. The question is, would you?